conversation of Calvinism. You know, and this is frustrating to me as a host on a platform that is really trying to bring guys on that can help the body, that can really train the body, that can really keep the body, protect the body from heresies such as the stuff that we were watching today. So I'm gonna read this out of the appreciation of your super chat. And it says, all the comments by your guests can be directly applied to the false gospel of Calvinism as well. Calvinists also resistant to the truth that Jesus died for all of humanity. That is 100% absolutely categorically false. First of all, Calvinism is not a gospel. It's a theological position, more central around the doctrines of grace. It is not a gospel. That's one. Two, categorically, Calvinists believe that Jesus Christ died for all humanity. Yes, we have interpretive grid upon the way we interpret that all, but certainly we believe that God died for his people. So I know it seems as my tone has worn up a little bit, but it sort of frustrates me that we cannot get past this understanding of Calvinism. Yes, Calvinism disagrees with the synergist or the Arminian. Yes, straight up. But that does not mean that you impose this Calvinism. I know what you're about to say, Colin. You got it. But it's vitally important that you understand that when a topic is being discussed, please make sure your super chats is centered around that topic. What you got, Colin?
Let me say this. I had this discussion with a person that this young brother, he's a lot younger than us, who he follows, that being Leighton Flowers. And I respect Leighton Flowers. I respect James White. But what happens is, and this goes into this, when you start demonizing people who are true believers, who just have understood salvation differently, obviously one of the groups is right or more wrong, fine. But what happens is when you start and you have this singular focus on Calvinism, what happens is, just like in the Sixth Sense, you start seeing Calvinists in everything that you do. And so I stated, and of course, Mr. Flowers accused me of being a Calvinist, which I never said I was. I never said I wasn't. But I said I would never tell you that, because all you're going to ever do is judge me based off of what this other person has said, rather than listen to the text that I'm dealing with. What happened, this is why I'm bringing this up, guys, because the frustrating part is we can't have a discussion about this because you're bringing something that has nothing to do with this whatsoever. It's almost like you are looking for a Calvinist to cut. If the Calvinists help your grandmother cross the street, you'd be upset with them for not doing it fast enough or in a mean fashion, or you thought, whatever it is. Stop what you paid $13.99 for some foolishness to be aired. You ban yourself, because you have no business being here. You don't. We're talking about one thing, and you're not adult enough to stay in the framework of this conversation. When Marlon has someone on to talk about Calvinism, or you want to talk about provisionism, well then fine, bring it up. But not here. Come on, you're an adult. You're not 14. You're not Marcus Rodgers. You say that you have a Bible, follow it, and comport yourself like a mature Christian ought to. I'm sorry, Marlon.
No, you good, man. I mean, it's just... Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, let me throw this in. In the history of the church, it's interesting. What's been condemned more than any other heresy has not been, Arianism or something like that, which we might expect. That's what usually gets discussed the most. But what's been condemned is Pelagianism and semi-Pelagianism, more than any other view in church history. Now, I'm not saying that Arminians are Pelagians or semi-Pelagians. I'm simply saying that those were the views that were condemned. What was not condemned and was always considered within Christianity and debatable was the Augustinian position and then certain modified forms of that, where people discussed issues pertaining to the relationship of grace and the will and that sort of thing. And that's why, even when you look at like evangelical Arminians like Wesley, I have a greater appreciation for Wesley than I do with some contemporary folks that would call themselves Arminian. But Wesley was an evangelical Arminian, meaning that he didn't deny the necessity of grace in the case of, a person coming to Christ. That's where he had to introduce the concept of prevenient grace, that God's grace comes before. Now, he viewed that grace as resistible, but the point was that he recognized the necessity of grace in order for a person who's fallen to believe. Now, here's my point in bringing that up. Pelagianism and semi-Pelagianism were condemned. The Augustinian view of the Protestant reformers like Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Ulrich Zwingli and Beza and all the rest of them, those were all acceptable Christian positions. It's only today that you've got these people pretending that it's like outside, the range of Christian belief and off the table. These guys are all heretics. It shows a fundamental failure to even know church history, I think. And certainly the Bible raises these issues, doesn't it? You can't escape. Let me bring up one thing, because this is what usually drives some people's hostility to this issue. The one thing that people bring up often is the fact that on Calvinism, God is sovereign even over evil, right? So the evil that happens in time is something that God sovereignly determined from eternity. But even on a classical Arminian view, where you have the same concept of God, at least with respect to his attributes, that God is omniscient, even on that view, it's understood that God knew all the evil that was going to happen in time if he chose to create. The very fact that God chose to create, knowing how all things would eventuate, including the fact that certain people were going to end up in hell forever, right? That's just as much something that follows on an Arminian approach as on a Calvinist approach, that God determined that. It's not something that can be distinctively laid at the feet of Calvinists. So I'm just bringing this up to say that, these are two views that have been debated in the context of Christianity, and Christians who have debated them have recognized both sides as authentically Christian. It's not the same sort of thing as the debate between Trinitarians and anti-Trinitarians. It's not even, it's not an in-house, the Trinitarian issues are not in-house debates, right? If somebody denies the Trinity, we're talking about another God. If somebody has a different approach to the question of, God's sovereignty and man's freedom, there are thorny issues that Christians have legitimately debated, right? And we can do that, but to pretend that it's on the same level, I think it's just, historically it's out of step, and, there's 100 things we can say biblically about that.
Yeah.
By the way, if I could just throw this in real quick, one more point. I'm a pastor in the Presbyterian Church of America. That is a Reformed denomination. The Presbyterian Church does not exclude Arminians from being members. There's no requirement for anybody to be a Calvinist to be a member at a Reformed Presbyterian church, right? The Reformed Presbyterians say there's no greater condition to be a member of our church than there is to get into heaven, right? A true confession of faith in Christ is all that's needed to be a member of a Presbyterian church. And so I mention that only because some of the stuff I hear about Calvinism, Calvinists are supposed to be these mean, nasty people and so forth, and I'm thinking, that's usually my experience with a lot of, non-Calvinists.